A very good morning. Welcome to Agenda. I'm Natasha Jhabhaskar. In the next 1 hour, we'll tell you all that is expected to come up in Lok Sabha's legislative business for the day. How the MPs on our show assessing Budget 2014. Important questions listed in the question hour. We'll be discussing all of this and much more. But before we get straight into our discussion, a quick look on today's agenda. In the question hour, important questions listed for Ministry of Communications and Information Technology are verification of telecom subscribers, telecom services in northeast or hilly states, telecom growth. Ministry of Steel will also be asked a question on performance of steel companies. Shortage of staff in ESI hospitals, labour courts or tribunals, unemployment due to closure of industries are questions listed for Ministry of Labour and Employment. Questions listed for Ministry of Civil Aviation are civil airports and helipads in northeast region, arbitrary airfares. Papers to be laid. Matters under Rule 377 will be taken up. In legislative business, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India Amendment Bill 2014 is listed for consideration and passing. This will be followed by general discussion on the budget railways for 2014-15, followed by voting on the demands for excess grants railways for 2011-12. So the new government has delivered its first budget studded with tax breaks, bold structural reforms and tighter spending. Arun Jaitley in his budget speech said that the government could not rely only on spending cuts to reduce the budget deficit and should also work to spur economic growth back to 7 to 8%, which would result in higher tax revenue. He said that a revival of manufacturing and building of new infrastructure are ways to provide jobs. And joining me for more on all of this, I have with me Member of Parliament from BJP, Gajendra Singh Shekhawat. Thank you very much, Mr. Shekhawat, for joining us in this program. Also with me, Sushmita Dev, Member of Parliament from Congress Party. Thank you very much, Ms. Dev, for joining us in this program. And BJ Panda from BJD. Thank you very much, Mr. Panda, for joining us in this program. Coming straight to you, Mr. Shekhawat. Is this a common man budget? We were hoping for a big bang budget from the BJP, the fact that there was a huge mandate from for your party. Is this a budget which people will call a miracle, or is it rather very cautious budget from your side?
जहाँ तक ये बजट माननीय अरुण जेटली जी ने प्रस्तुत किया है, इस बजट के लिए मैं ये कह सकता हूँ कि ये बजट इस देश के आने वाले भविष्य के लिए आधारशिला की नींव की ईंट की तरह होगा। और जिस तरह के प्रावधान उन्होंने इस बजट में किए हैं, निश्चित रूप से ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण के लिए आने वाले समय में याद किया जाएगा।
लेकिन शेखावत जी, हम क्या ये कह सकते हैं कि आपको जिस तरह का मैंडेट मिला था, लोग आशा कर रहे थे कि कुछ इस अलग तरह का बजट आएगा, ऐसा बजट आएगा तो शायद अच्छे दिन जो आपकी सरकार ने प्रोपेगेंडा के टाइम पे बात करी थी, तो क्या हम कह सकते हैं कि बीजेपी अपने ही प्रोपेगेंडा का अब विक्टिम बन चुका है, क्योंकि उसे पता है कि जो कांग्रेस ने उसे दिया है वो इकोनॉमी इतनी सुदृढ़ नहीं है, इतनी स्ट्रांग नहीं है और चैलेंजेस उसके लिए बहुत सारे हैं।
जिस तरह की स्थिति देश की कांग्रेस के 10 साल के शासन के बाद में हुई थी, उस स्थिति को देखते हुए यदि हम राजनीतिक महत्वाकांक्षा के साथ में कोई और कमिटमेंट करते तो वो इस देश के साथ में, आने वाली पीढ़ियों के साथ में, इस देश के भविष्य के साथ में न्याय नहीं होता। निश्चित रूप से क्योंकि ये बजट इस सरकार का पहला बजट है और ये बजट भी पहले इंटरिम बजट आ चुका है, उसके बाद में बजट आया है, तो इस बजट में जितना कुछ किया जाने का स्कोप था और भविष्य को देखते हुए जो कुछ किया जा सकता था, उस बजट में सारे प्रावधान किए गए। लेकिन ये कहना कि बीजेपी अपने ही प्रोपेगेंडा की विक्टिम हो गई है, ये बिल्कुल भी उचित नहीं है।
Okay, Ms. Dev, your take on this particular Union Budget 2014, first from Arun Jaitley, and the fact that this is being seen as a very cautious but a very realistic budget. The fact that it is a tightrope walk, it was a tightrope walk for the finance minister between fiscal prudence and the promises he has made to the common man.
There's a huge gap between what they said in their manifesto and what is in this budget. It may be a conservative budget, like is being said by many, and I don't think that can be disputed. But the fact is, this is not what you reflected to the nation before you went for the mandate. And the mandate you got, and it's repeatedly be saying it's a decisive mandate, and it has to be admitted. And the decisive mandate was, the basis of that was not a conservative budget. And in this budget, many of the critics have said that it almost sounds like a UPA budget.
Right.
He hasn't moved away much.
It's a UPA budget, not an
So
NDA budget.
I think what I would say is that Mr. Jaitley said in 45 days he couldn't do much. But I would say after seeing the budget, this could have been done in 45 hours.
But will you also acknowledge the fact that this particular government has inherited a very weak economy? The economy in the last 10 years we have seen has rather gone through a major downslide. 25 years, the lowest economy growth in the last 25 years. These are reasons which which has forced the government to come up with this kind of a budget which is very cautious, and the government is buying time to even bring in reforms, maybe in next Feb then.
See, I'll tell you, in 2010, I read in the library that Mr. Jaitley, while he was in the opposition, called the UPA government a government of alibis, of explanations, because we had said about the economic crisis globally. We had talked about international oil prices. That time, this was not an explanation good enough for Mr. Jaitley. But today, he himself sounds like a finance minister of alibi.
Okay.
And we repeatedly said during our election campaign that they are not going to be able to deliver in the manner and the magnitude that they are promising.
Okay.
And this budget is evidence of that. There are no deliverables in this budget.
Okay. Mr. Panda, your take, the big reforms are missing. India Inc. has given a thumbs up to this Made in Modi budget, calling it very realistic. Do you think this budget is rather very realistic or just very cautious? The government has not taken all the challenges or the promises it made to the common man while achieving this huge mandate?
First of all, I should point out that it is typical that people who are associated with the government will just give it a complete thumbs up. People who are associated with the opposition give it a complete thumbs down. That's not correct. Let us take a very balanced view of it. The reality is that Mr. Jaitley had very few options because of the shape of the economy.
That's right.
To say that they have not done anything big bang is not correct. They have done several big bang things. For example, the very aggressive focus on the fiscal deficit and not only accepting what was inherited, but to give a challenge of taking it down to 3% in the next 2 years. People don't understand that the fiscal deficit is the cornerstone of inflation. It is the cornerstone of rupee devaluation.
Right.
So when you complain about that, you need to look at the root cause. So that very aggressive target setting is clear that they are going for big bang. Look at 38,000 crores given to highways. Look at 15,000 crores given to rural roads. This is very reminiscent of what Prime Minister Vajpayee did in giving a big thrust to the economy. On the and at the same time, I would say that on that front, they have not gone whole hog. For example, they could have started drastically cutting social sector expenditure, which the UPA government had initiated. They have not done that. There are no drastic cuts. So that's why people are saying that this is cautious. You know, the reality is this. If you have sub 5% growth, you have fewer jobs, you have certain level of poverty, and if you remove that the social sector expenditure, suddenly you will find a lot of poor people in a desperate situation. You can't start cutting those expenses until you actually have growth back up at 6, 7, 8%.
He has also stressed that I don't want to cut expenditure, but I want to increase my revenues. I want to focus more on how I can generate more revenues. That's a marked shift from the UPA 2 government, where the focus was largely on how to cut expenditure, how to actually control the fiscal deficit. He's also accepted that it is a daunting task of bringing it down from 4.1% to 3.6% and then to 3%. But as many are focusing at this stage, the budget is largely to boost consumption. This is what experts have said, that the focus is largely on how to boost consumption. Let's
not get caught up in these technicalities. You know, for the common citizen, for the Aam Aadmi, for viewers of your channel, let's explain it very clearly. He has, with this thrust on rural roads, thrust on highways, also he has given a lot of comfort to investors, because we desperately need a lot of investment in the economy. That has not been happening. He has given comfort to the financial sector, because if you don't do that, then the investment won't come in. Like China has been attracting tens of billions of dollars every year in investment. We are getting a fraction of that. So these are all growth oriented. But to think that costs need not be managed is unrealistic. They will have to cut costs. Look at it. You know, if you don't consider tobacco taxes going from 11% to 72%, then you tell me what is Big Bang if that is not Big Bang.
Right.
Now this is particularly precious to me, because I have been advocating the cause of higher tobacco taxes and bigger warnings, because India spends 35,000 crores every year on tobacco related diseases.
Right.
But again, it has not been fully aggressive. It has been somewhat aggressive. For example, BDs have not been included. You know, let's not pretend that the poor people don't get cancer. It is not that only the middle class people and upper class people get cancer. Poor people also get cancer. So we have not been, you know, as bold as I would have liked to be.
The focus is also on infrastructure, knowing very well that if you want to attract an investment, you have to build in infrastructure for this country. We're talking about FDI, we're talking about public-private partnership, be it the railways or the union budget. But quickly, your comment also on when the government says we want to hit the fiscal deficit target, why aren't you talking about subsidy reforms?
Yes, I think they are, but they're doing it quietly. The reality is, one of the good things that the UPA government did was the Aadhaar scheme. Because, you know, if you remember from Rajiv Gandhi's time, it was talked about every rupee that the government spends, only 15 paisa reaches the average citizen. Today, that figure is 27 paisa. The Planning Commission has a figure that every rupee they spend on PDS, only 27 paisa reaches the Aam Aadmi. Now, the Aadhaar scheme, I think, is a good scheme because it bypasses the corrupt government system of leakages and extra costs, directly delivers to people. This is something that I think the BJP unreasonably opposed while it was in opposition. Now, if they are to actually meet the fiscal target without drastically sort of forgetting about poor people, then they will need to do things like Aadhaar or something similar. I think they are doing it quietly because having opposed it so much, today it's a balancing act. You will see today in the newspapers they have said that Aadhaar is not being junked. They are going to bring in a law. I think it's a good thing if they do it.
And they have voted for FDI, and in fact largely in all the sectors, but they had a problem in FDI and multi-brand retail. But Mr. Shekhawat, also your opinion on FDI and insurance and FDI and defense sector, increasing it to 49%. There were many who said that even this move is very cautious. Why not 74%? You want to improve the defense sector, you want to build in greater indigenous industry, you want to bring in FDI in the defense sector. Why didn't you make it 74%?
सीधे 74% करने से विपक्ष को शायद कुछ और बात करने का मौका मिल जाता, लेकिन जिस तरह से देश की आवश्यकता है, उस आवश्यकता को देखते हुए निश्चित रूप से जो वर्तमान में ऐसी स्थिति थी कि इसमें जो रक्षा क्षेत्र का जो निर्माण है, रक्षा उपकरणों का और हथियारों का निर्माण है, इस क्षेत्र में हम FDI को आकर्षित करें, लेकिन फिर भी इसके पीछे भावना ये है कि हम रक्षा क्षेत्र में विनिर्माण का जो है कंट्रोल हमारे पास में रखें, हमारे पास में रहे, इसलिए ये 49% तक ही रखा गया है.
Right, so you want to control the defense sector and to focus more on FDI. The major challenge for the new finance minister is how to actually lift economic growth to rates of 7 to 8%, also how to control fiscal deficits. Now time for me to take a short break. Next, when we come back on the other side of this break, we'll discuss important questions listed in the question hour today. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Agenda. In Budget 2014, the Finance Minister has raised the import duty on stainless steel up from 5% to 7.5% to help domestic firms. Domestic stainless steel industry is suffering from severe underutilization of capacity. India's steel consumption grew by 0.6% in 2013-14 fiscal, slowest in at least 4 years. India is the fourth largest steel maker in the world. The sector contributes about 2% of the country's GDP and employs over 6 lakh people. An important question listed in the question hour today is on performance of steel companies. Coming back to you, Mr. Panda, now steel sector plays a vital role in infrastructure, and we need some sort of a short-term boosters for the industry. We have seen in this particular budget, the minister has raised the import duty on stainless steel from 5% to 7.5%. Is this a step forward?
As you pointed out, this is actually a short-term measure.
Right.
It will help in the short term, but very fundamental things need to be tackled. We have an ironic situation. Although we are the world's fourth largest steel maker, it is more economic for us to export raw material. Iron ore gets exported to China, and we import finished products back, steel and other finished products back from foreign countries. It is ironic. It is economically viable to do this because of our own infrastructure, laws and so on. So I would say 4 points. Point number one is raw material. Our raw material is not easily, even though it is in India, it is not easily available because of the mining mess that needs to be sorted out. Number two is electricity. We are still not able in the 21st century to assure proper electricity, even at a proper market cost, to steel producers and others. Number three is infrastructure and transport. We have a terrible inefficiency in that. It is cheaper to transport raw material from Paradip port all the way to Japan, rather than to move it from Keonjhar to Paradip, which is within the state of Odisha, a few hundred kilometers. This is bizarre. It needs to be changed. And fourth and most important is ease of doing business. Our labor laws, our excise laws, our inspector Raj is so complicated that nobody wants to get into manufacturing. You ask young Indian entrepreneurs, they want to start software companies or other things, they don't want to get into manufacturing. So, the other measures taken broadly, nothing to do with steel industry, but generally to help the manufacturing sector, will also help the steel industry. But these four fundamental problems relating to steel industry need to be tackled. The short term, the import duty will give a little help to the stainless steel industry for the next year, but these things have to be tackled in the next 12 months, otherwise the future is not going to be bright.
And the fact that the sector contributes about 2% of the country's GDP and employs over 6 lakh people says a lot about the industry, the number of people employed in this industry and how it is affecting, because China has an average custom duty of 10% and Brazil has an average custom duty of 14%. That makes it importing easier from China or Brazil rather than actually exporting, because even for raw materials, the domestic makers have been demanding 15% duty. They were also demanding removal of the basic customs duty on steel. So overall, it says that the domestic industry, we need to look for long-term measures. The government has to be more focused and very clear-cut in the kind of approach it wants to use for the steel industry.
As I was saying, the irony is this: we have large deposits of raw materials. We have lots of people that need employment. We have a coastline with port. We have coal to generate our own electricity. Despite all of this, our steel industry is handicapped, and in fact, the entire manufacturing sector is handicapped. So, customs duties are like a band-aid. You can fix it. If you increase the customs duty, imports will get reduced for a while, and domestic steel producers will get a little bit of help. But that will increase the cost of steel for consumers, so it will actually affect inflation as well. This is all right for a short-term measure, but long-term measure, customs duties can't be high. Long-term measure, you have to sort out these issues of guaranteed availability of electricity, raw material, labor laws, and infrastructure
and
transport.
Also boost demand, because this budget, when it talks about personal tax exemptions, also tax concessions, in a way, people will go and buy cars, people will go and look for houses. This is going to help the steel industry. Do you think that, Mr. Shekhawat?
45 दिन की सरकार से इस बात की अपेक्षा करनी कि वो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर को एकदम से रिवाइव कर देगा, ये अनुचित है। लेकिन जिस तरह की अभी वर्तमान में आवश्यकता थी कि जैसा आपने कहा कि 10% चाइना में इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी है, मेरे हिसाब से जहाँ तक मेरे को आंकड़ों का पता है 15% इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी है चाइना में स्टील के प्रोडक्ट्स पे, और वेयरएज इंडिया में 5% थी। और जिस तरह से चाइना से और ब्राज़ील से हमारे यहाँ से स्टील का आयात हो रहा था, उसके कारण से हमारी स्टील इंडस्ट्री भारी दबाव में थी। न केवल भारत सरकार की जो पब्लिक सेक्टर की स्टील इंडस्ट्रीज हैं, RINPL एंड सेल, उसके अलावा भी जो स्टील मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, जो स्मॉल स्केल इंडस्ट्रीज हैं स्टील के क्षेत्र में, मैं जोधपुर क्षेत्र से आता हूँ, जोधपुर में स्टील की रीरोलिंग मिल्स हैं, अहमदाबाद में हैं, ये सारी जो इंडस्ट्रीज हैं ये भी भारी कष्ट में थी। और उनको शीघ्र अगर जो है राहत नहीं दी जाती तो निश्चित रूप से ये तय था कि वो इंडस्ट्री समाप्त हो जाती। उनको जिस तरह से एक बार राहत प्रदान की गई है, इससे उस इंडस्ट्री को रिवाइवल मिलेगा और एक बार उन इंडस्ट्रीज को वापस अपने पैरों पे खड़े होने की शक्ति मिलेगी। इस तरह की स्थिति अगर बनती है, उसके बाद में ये सरकार, क्योंकि अभी 45 दिन की सरकार से हम अपेक्षा करें कि वो सारी चीज़ों को एक साथ रिवाइव कर देंगे, लेकिन ये तय है कि इस स्टील, क्योंकि मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इंडस्ट्री का ही एक हिस्सा है और भारत की इकोनॉमी में, GDP में बहुत बड़ा अहम योगदान रखता है और इसके ऊपर बहुत सारी दूसरी इंडस्ट्रीज आधारित हैं।
Right, so give some more time to the government. This is what you are saying. Ms. Dev, initiatives to boost manufacturing and infrastructure sector, the high points of this particular budget, where the minister also said there's a planned construction, there's a proposal of planned construction of 100 smart cities and house for everyone for 2000 by 2022, and development of 15,000 kilometer of pipeline for the oil and gas sector, 8,500 kilometer of roads, and development of new ports and airports. So that, can we say this will actually boost the domestic steel industry, because when the demand will go up in these sectors?
NDA's propaganda always has been that they have been or intend to be a government with huge focus on infrastructure. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, this budget definitely does not reflect that. But as Mr. Jaitley said, that it is directional. But some of the targets he's set himself or allocations that he's set himself are unrealistic. To take a small example about the smart cities, the amount he has set out in the budget is, I don't think, sufficient for even one city. Okay. But if I say anything repeatedly, Shekhawat ji will say it's too early to say anything. So let us see how things unfold. Let us give him the benefit of the doubt. But I hope it will not be mere symbolism in the next 1 year or so. That will unfold.
Okay, so you're saying this is, Mr. Jaitley might say this is a directional budget, but Mr. Panda, there are no clear-cut roadmaps, as many say. You have your target, but you don't really know how you're going to achieve them, even if be it the fiscal deficit, or even if it is about the 100 smart cities and house for everyone by 2022. But these kind of targets, the initiatives to boost manufacturing and the infrastructure sector, do you think this is going to give a boost to the domestic steel industry?
Actually, if you don't want to be deliberately uncharitable, I think there are plenty of clues as to what is the roadmap.
Right.
You've seen the dramatic refocusing on the railway budget. We'll come to that in a later section. Look at the subsidy regime. No drastic cuts of the UPA government's social sector expenditure, but a rearrangement. Take a look at this. Food subsidy increased by 25%. Who does this help? This doesn't help the middle class. This helps the poor class. At the same time, your fuel subsidy decreased by 26%, which means the cost of fuel is going to go up, and this doesn't affect the poor. This affects the middle class.
Right.
So why is this done? Because the middle class then has simultaneously got a little bit of help in terms of the raised floors of taxation.
Exemption limits.
Right. So they are balancing out. Maybe the middle class will come out slightly ahead, but the poor are going to come out substantially ahead. They have in fact increased it beyond what the UPA government had given.
Right.
So the focus is very clear that middle class will not be affected. They'll be allowed to prosper on their own. Poor will be given a leg up until and unless the growth kicks in.
Right.
And that's why the enormous focus on growth. So let's not be too uncharitable. He had a very limited bag of options to play with. The question is, can they implement this? I want to say something which I was saying off camera, that UPA and NDA have been accused of presenting the same budget, and some people are saying that if Mr. Chidambaram had presented this budget, it wouldn't have got as much support as it is getting. The fact is, in your first year, you will always get the benefit of doubt.
Right.
If you present even a very nice budget in your 7th or 8th year, and in between your performance has been poor, people don't believe you.
So you'll be thrashed.
So it depends on the implementation. The hints towards the roadmap are very clearly there.
Right. So hints for the roadmap are clearly there, and as you rightly pointed out, that give some time to the new government, and we'll see how far these important schemes and allocations get implemented. Another important question listed today in the question is on unemployment due to closure of industries. In fact, Indian automotive sector had lost about 25 to 30 lakh jobs in the last 2 years. Now, unemployment remains a huge challenge for the new government. On one side, we're talking about young population, demographic dividend. On the other side, we don't have skilled professionals in key areas. Do you think this is something which the new government is challenged to grapple with?
It's a desperate requirement. You know, when the growth went down, even sub 5% growth could have created jobs, but it has been the jobless growth. Even when it was high, even when it has come down to low, jobless growth. And the other irony is, despite our demographics, half of our population is young, they are in the working age. But there is a nexus. Let's face it, there is a political nexus in education sector which has prevented reform of the higher education, even reform in some other school level education sectors. And as a result, although we are churning out very large number of engineers, not everybody is employable. Large number of those engineers are not employable. Now a crackdown has started. You've heard about several hundred medical seats being disqualified because those institutions did not meet the parameters. This is a good first step.
Right.
I think drastic steps need to be taken to make sure that the education creates employability. But as far as manufacturing sector goes, as far as jobs in automotive sector goes, you can of course have band-aid for 6 months or 1 year, but the real answer will be similar to what I told you about the steel industry. Unless you fix the environment in which these businesses operate, unless you fix the ease of doing business, the inspector Raj and the corruption at the ground level,
right.
These industries will not be able to create jobs.
Ms. Dev, quickly your comment on this particular question, unemployment due to closure of industry. Now, that's a huge challenge for the new government, because on one side, when you're talking about demographic dividend, you are also struggling with unemployment. You don't have skilled professionals, and that's the huge paradox. If you talk about medical sector, you have the highest number of medical colleges, but the doctor-patient ratio in our country is terrible. It has nothing to do with the WHO statistics. What does it say about the current state of higher education in our country when Mr. Panna talks about the nexus, the political nexus in the education sector? The challenge is because you have been in the government for the last 10 years.
See, no one can deny the fact that there is a huge difference between creating a policy and then implementing it. And I think my ears are sore hearing for the last few days in the session and the first session that in the last 10 years this hasn't happened and that hasn't happened. I think every budget and every government has a certain set of performances and maybe certain set of, if you like, scope for improvement. And the Honorable Prime Minister in his speech in the Central Hall itself said that every government has tried to do what they can. But like I sorry, but I'm being repetitive, but the question is, what is this government going to do? And if you're talking about skill, they have simply talked about Skill India, whereas the National Skill Development Mission was already in place.
Right.
And we can't always look at employment. We have to emphasize on building the skill of the youth.
But I'm
that
sure
is the need of the hour.
UPA will always be blamed for not taking several
Of
initiatives,
course.
because there have been several recommendations, be it the Yashpal Commission.
UP has been blamed not for 10 years but for 60 years.
Right, but and the kind of initiatives it failed to take in the higher education sector, and even the recent debate which we saw on the FYUP program of Delhi University and the tussle between the UGC and Delhi University says a lot about the way higher education is being governed in our country. It's now time for me to take a short break. Next, when we come back, on the other side of this break, another important question listed in the question hour today on telecom services and also on TRAI amendment bill. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Agenda. Amid protests by Trinamool Congress, the NDA government on Friday introduced the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India Amendment Bill to facilitate the appointment of former TRAI Chairman Nripendra Misra as the Prime Minister's Principal Secretary. The bill seeks to replace an ordinance promulgated by it on May 28th to allow the TRAI Chairperson and whole-time members to accept employment after 2 years from the date from which they cease to hold office. The bill is likely to be taken up today. Coming back to you, Mr. Shekhawat, now we know this TRAI amendment bill is a huge challenge for the new government now. The fact that the parties in the Lok Sabha are having a huge problem. We thought there was a pro in Lok Sabha on a Friday. What's the need of actually having an ordinance first, and now knowing very well that you might not even be in a position, there will be a strong fight from the Congress and at this stage even from Trinamool Congress to get this bill passed?
इस बिल को पास कराना एक चैलेंज है ऐसा मुझे तो लगता नहीं है। लोकसभा में जैसी स्थिति है उसको देखते हुए बिल्कुल भी ये कोई चैलेंज नहीं है। और जहाँ तक इस बिल की आवश्यकता का प्रश्न है, इसको केवल नृपेंद्र मिश्रा के जो है अपॉइंटमेंट के साथ में जोड़ के देखा जाना उचित नहीं है। इस बिल में इसके अतिरिक्त भी बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं, उनको ओवरलुक किया जा रहा है। तो ऐसी स्थिति नहीं है कि केवल उसके लिए नृपेंद्र मिश्रा के अपॉइंटमेंट के लिए बिल लाया जा रहा है, ऐसा कहना उचित नहीं है।
Okay, Ms. Dev, your take. Congress has said it has questioned the decision of government to promulgate an ordinance to facilitate this appointment.
There are two issues here. One, no one can dispute the fact that the president has the power to pass an ordinance where he thinks an immediate decision is required. Secondly, the Honorable Prime Minister of India has the right to choose who he wants to work with.
Right.
Those two things are not at an issue. But the justification flies in the face of it because this act has been there since 1997, if I'm not wrong. And now they're comparing it to the IRDA and the other acts, saying why does the chairman of TRAI have to suffer from the law?
This was brought by the former NDA government.
So correct. So what I'm saying is, from 97, no one has seen the injustice that is being done because of the lacuna in the TRAI Act, and all of a sudden this government has brought it to the floor of the House on the justification that it is unfair to the TRAI chairman. So there's some suspicion. Then I think the agenda is very clear. It is something that is being pushed through for the convenience of the Honorable Prime Minister of India, and that is what is contentious.
Okay.
Not the act of the ordinance itself.
Okay, not the act or the ordinance. Mr. Panda, your take on this, the fact that the Prime Minister has the right to choose who he wants as his principal secretary.
Again, it is typical for people in government and opposition to just take a pre-scripted line. I won't do that. Let's examine this very carefully. We all agree that the Prime Minister has the right to choose his own team. We all agree that the ordinance can be passed. It's a question of passing the act. The reality is that all government agencies and regulators have a 2-year cooling off period. That means anybody who's been in that position has to have a 2-year cooling off period before he or she can take up any government post. TRAI is the only exception, which had that once you become a chairman, you can't serve in government. When this was promulgated in 1997, I think the thinking was that this should become the norm. But later on, whatever like IRDA and others were passed, it didn't become the norm, because I think people started thinking it's very unfair that people won't be allowed to serve in government if they have had a regulatory a term in a regulatory agency. So this has become the exception. So to say that this should be brought in line with what has happened before and what has happened after is, I think, completely normal. Now, let's go to the crux of the issue. When there was hint that there is something fishy about it, why are these cooling off periods there? 2 years, or in this case it is indefinite. Cooling off period is there that government should not be able to entice senior bureaucrats that here we give you a plum position so that you help us and afterwards we'll accommodate you somewhere, right? But in this case, he was appointed to TRAI by UPA.
Right.
Now he is being recruited to PMO by Shri Modi.
Right.
So there is no question that Mr. Modi was not in a position to help him in any case to get the TRAI position. So it is petty to say that somehow there is something fishy.
So you're saying the opposition is opposing just for the sake of it? There is no logical reason behind it?
Because, you know, if he had been given an appointment by this government and later on given another appointment not as per rules and the rules were being accommodated, then you could say there was something fishy, that you had had an underhand understanding. But he was appointed by the previous government, and now this government is taking
and going by the rules and the procedures. There's nothing wrong in this, because the similar thing has happened even in other organizations.
This is not a constitutional change. It's a routine amendment of one of the rules. Now, before TRAI Act, everything in the government has these 2-year cooling off period. After TRAI Act, all these similar bodies have a 2-year cooling off period. So the intention in 97 that once you get into a regulatory body, you will never be in any government service, that has not worked out. It has been changed. So we should rationalize it. There's nothing wrong in it.
Right. And what does it say about the breakdown of communication between the treasury benches and the opposition? Because the fact that we are this kind of an opposition coming on, bills, there's several important bills which have to be passed.
Let's be very frank. Her party is trying to embarrass the government. It's not a major policy issue. It is not a constitutional issue. Their party probably did not realize what they were getting into when the Prime Minister chose the person that he has confidence in. Then they realized there is a technical problem. This is not the be-all or the end-all of cooperation between opposition and treasury benches. They're just trying to embarrass the government, and I think it should not be in this particular case. It should be on an issue of substance.
Okay, this is not an issue of substance, and the Congress is just creating ruckus.
Well, Mr. Panda is entitled to his views, and we are entitled to ours. That's what democracy is all about. But it is definitely, like I'm repeatedly saying, that all of a sudden now we are trying to reconcile the laws for one man. And that's the contention. He may be magnanimous enough to feel it's all right, I may not.
Okay. Mr. Shekhawat, also, I want your comments on the fact that, what we are witnessing right now is not good floor management, breakdown of communication between the treasury benches and the opposition. The fact that you have to pass several important bills in Lok Sabha, though you have a huge mandate, but you would need a strong opposition, because the role of opposition is rather very strong. We already know the Congress is looking for an opportunity. It is asking for a leader of opposition position in the Lok Sabha. Do you think BJP is going to accommodate this demand?
बीजेपी डिमांड को अकोमोडेट करे, उसके लिए अगर टेक्निकलिटीज़ को देखा जाए तब तो ऐसा कोई आवश्यक नहीं है कि उसको वो डिमांड को अकोमोडेट करे। और जहाँ तक फ्लोर मैनेजमेंट का प्रश्न है, तो जिस तरह की स्थिति लोकसभा में पिछले 5-6 दिन में बनी है, उस स्थिति को देखते हुए तो ऐसा लगता है कि सिर्फ अपोजिशन के लिए, अपोजिशन इस भावना के लिए के साथ में काम किया। जैसा मिस्टर देव ने अभी कहा कि सिर्फ हम अपोजिशन के लिए अपोजिशन कर रहे हैं यार। इसी के लिए इस जो ट्राई का जो बिल लाया गया है, इस ट्राई के बिल पे भी कि सिर्फ हमको अपोजिशन करना है इसलिए अपोजिशन कर रहे हैं, ऐसा किया जा रहा है।
मैं इफ यू परमिट मी फॉर अ मोमेंट, you know, if in the budget Mr. Jaitley had actually reduced the subsidy on food, then I think that would have been the issue on which they would have had a real fight between Congress and BJP.
Right.
Since that has not happened, most of the pet projects have not got underfunded or anything like that. This is the only point on which there is friction
is
today.
the Congress short on ideas? Because from the fact the way it started its campaigning in the elections and now in the opposition with 44 MPs, is the opposition now trying to create a space for itself, the fact knowing very well that it doesn't really have much say in all that is happening in Lok Sabha now?
I would like to say that we repeatedly look back at the 10 years and talk about UPA's performance. Let's look at the conduct of the opposition in the last 10 years. Now that we are talking about floor management. So it can't be chit bhi meri or pat bhi meri. I don't think it suits the Bharatiya Janata Party to take a higher moral ground vis-a-vis floor management, and we feel we have the right to demand an LOP. We'll continue to do that. It's their prerogative to follow the law or respect that demand. And I would say floor management should not be an issue with them given their mandate, but they should not feel that the opposition is negligible and we will not raise our voice. Mr. Panda has repeatedly said we are criticizing for the sake of criticizing, but I don't agree with that. It is as the opposition, it is our duty to point out the lacunas or shortfalls.
Right.
It may match up to someone's standards, or no, that's a separate
Right,
issue,
so the
but we'll
opposition is
continue
just
to
doing
do
its
it.
job, pointing out the lacunas and the
इस विषय पे मैं आपका ध्यान आकर्षित करना चाहता हूँ। महंगाई के बारे में इन्होंने चर्चा मांगी और उसके ऊपर कितना हंगामा हुआ, लेकिन उस चर्चा के समय की मैं आपका ध्यान आकृष्ट करना चाहता हूँ। उस चर्चा की समय की रिकॉर्डिंग्स को आप देखें कि ओपोजिशन के कितने लोग वहाँ मौजूद थे जिन्होंने चर्चा मांगी थी, उनके कितने लोग वहाँ, कांग्रेस के, इनके पार्टी के कितने लोग वहाँ मौजूद रहे थे। उस चर्चा के प्रति इनकी सिंसियरिटी उससे परिलक्षित होती है। वहाँ जब चर्चा मांगी गई थी तब इतनी जोर शोर से मांगी गई थी, जब चर्चा हो रही थी तब वहाँ कौन लोग थे?
Okay. Mr. Panda, I want your comments also on the fact that the demand for leader of opposition position, is there anything like a 10% rule where it says that there should be a number of MPs, minimum 55 of the second largest to have a space of the leader of opposition? Because as what the rule book says, there is no rule on LOP, so any second largest party can have the position of LOP.
As I understand it, there are two conflicting rules, which is why it has to go to the speaker's discretion. As I understand it, there is a 10% rule for recognizing a party or a group.
Right.
And then there is a separate rule for leader, which says second largest party. So these are both by one interpretation, there should be an LOP. By another interpretation, there should not be an LOP. This is why it has to go to the speakers who has the ultimate discretion. And it is complicated further by the fact that in the past we have had a similar situation where there was no LOP.
Okay.
So that's what complicates the situation. But I think we should take it a bit more seriously, because today you have other bodies which require the presence of an LOP. You know, you have that appointment of judges and other things coming up. So it has to be seen holistically. I don't think we should get into it until the Honorable Speaker has taken a call,
Right.
because there are different interpretations and she has to take a call.
Right, and as many newspapers have reported today that BJP should not play a congress on this particular issue of LOP and rather be more accommodative and should look forward to a constructive opposition and give Congress a position of LOP, a leader of opposition. It's now time for me to take a short break. On the other side of this break, in our final segment, we'll focus on our railway budget. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You are watching Agenda. Lok Sabha will also take up railway budget for discussion today. The railway minister has promised to seek increased foreign and domestic private investment to fund modernization of the country's huge but badly stretched railway network. The state-owned railway has suffered from years of low investment and populist policies to subsidize fares. These have reduced the system to a slow, congested network that crimps economic growth. The major challenge is how the PPP can be, how greater investment can be attracted in railways when you don't have sufficient infrastructure. Mr. Shekhawat, as many say, the budget gives right signals but disappointed with lack of specifics. There are not much detail, clear-cut details as far as the railway budget is concerned. Also on upgrading of signal systems. Major non-NDA states ignored, as many, even West Bengal Chief Minister said that the one train allocated to her state, she will be returning it back, asking for no favors. What does it say about the railway budget?
देखिए, इस रेलवे बजट की भावना को समझने की आवश्यकता है। जिस तरह से पिछले कई वर्षों से लगातार पॉपुलिस्टिक जो घोषणाएं की गई, राजनीतिक दृष्टिकोण से घोषणाएं की गई, और जो स्थिति उन घोषणाओं की, जैसा आपने कहा कि उनके कारण से रेलवे की हुई है, इस दुर्दशा के उसे उबारने के लिए कहीं न कहीं एक लाइन ड्रॉ करने की ज़रूरत थी, और इस बजट ने वो लाइन ड्रॉ की है। क्योंकि जो पिछले, जैसा रेलवे मिनिस्टर ने कहा कि पिछले वर्षों में घोषणा की गई ऐसी अनेक परियोजनाएं अभी भी अबेंडेंट पड़ी है, जिसमें देश का और रेलवे का लाखों करोड़ रुपया अनप्रोडक्टिव पड़ा है। उस अनप्रोडक्टिव प्रोडक्ट्स को चाहते तो इस पे पुरानी परंपराओं की तरह इस बार भी बहुत सारी नई घोषणाएं की जा सकती थी, लेकिन उन्होंने प्रायोरिटी जो दी है वो पुरानी जो अबेंडेंट परियोजनाएं पड़ी हैं, जो रुकी हुई पड़ी हैं, जिसमें पैसा रुका हुआ है, उन सब परियोजनाओं को रिवाइव करने के लिए उन्होंने फंड एलोकेट किया है, और वो प्रायोरिटी के साथ में किया है। और उसके कारण से जो है, जो परियोजनाएं पूरी होंगी, और ऐसी जो 30 परियोजनाएं शॉर्टलिस्ट की गई हैं, आप अगर उन 30 परियोजनाओं को देखेंगे तो उसमें ज़्यादातर परियोजनाएं जो हैं वो वेस्ट बंगाल की हैं। इसलिए उनका ये कहना कि वेस्ट बंगाल को इग्नोर किया गया, ये बिल्कुल भी उचित नहीं है। और दूसरा, इस रेलवे बजट की जो खास बात है वो ये है कि वो यात्रियों की सुविधा और स्पीड के बढ़ाने, इन दो चीजों पे केंद्रित किया गया है।
राइट, सो पैसेंजर सेफ्टी, ऑल्सो sanitation, women's safety, high-speed train, that's a larger focus of this particular railway budget. Ms. Dev, out of the 99 projects which were sanctioned in last 10 years, only one project saw completion. This is what the railway minister said in his railway budget speech. What does it say about the way railway budget, the railways were tackled by your government? He said this is a realistic budget, I'm not going to be populist.
Well, Shri Adhir Ranjan delivered his speech on the railway budget, and he's refuted those figures. Anyway, without getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I think the thrust or the highlight or the much hyped thing about the railway budget has been PPP and cutting down on expenditure, therefore no new lines, but concentrating on completing whatever has been sanctioned, like you said. But I find it a bit odd to see that you need a public-private partnership for boundary walls of a railway station. The wisdom behind PPP is not to wholly depend on government resources, but to look to other funding, but to go to the extent of having to build a boundary wall and then to say no popular moves and then project something like 60,000 crores for a bullet train. Is that not some form of popular politics?
So you're saying you're calling it a populist?
So this is full of contradictions. I mean, it is easy to take a high ground.
Mr. Panda, the high point of this particular budget to meet resource crunch was private FDI and PPP in the railway budget. Now, if you talk about PPP, for the 5 years ended April 2012, there was a $16 billion investment target. Public-private partnerships accounted only for 4% of the total. How do you bring in PPP? This was a target even set by Mamata Banerjee earlier when she talked about Vision 2020 white paper on railways. Is this achievable when you talk about public-private partnership? Do you have sufficient railway infrastructure that people would like, investors would like to come and invest?
Before we understand that, we have to understand what dire circumstances the railway is in actually. It has one of the world's worst operating ratios. You look at the condition of our trains, look at people being packed in there like sardines, the safety, people are being pushed out of trains because of being overpacked. It has to change. Now, if you look at the overall vision statement that they've given, it is unimpeachable. Number one, that railways profitability must improve.
Right.
Number two, ongoing projects must be finished before new projects are announced. And number three is a focus on technology, safety and sanitation. These are unimpeachable. Now, we can all have different arguments. For example, in Odisha, we have a traditional grouse that we have been overlooked, and I can give you some statistics.
Right.
So, we have been asking for 3,100 crores. We got only 1,425 crores. So, of course, we will see the glass as half full, but even 1,425 crores is more than what the previous government was giving us.
Okay.
And certain ongoing projects, like in my constituency in Kendrapada, you have got the Haridaspur Paradip railway line has got nearly 200 crores. So, they will get done.
Right.
So, we are not entirely happy, nor are we very unhappy. Now, in terms of PPP, they have no choice, whether it is FDI or PPP, where is the money going to come from?
Right.
Now, I want to humbly disagree about which kind of project the money should go into. You mentioned about boundary walls. You know, the reality is government is very inefficient. So, when you bring in more money, you should conserve government investment or railways own investment for those which will give more profit. Managing a boundary wall will give it less profit to begin with.
Right.
And if using government's inefficiency, they will build it with more cost, they will manage it with more people, and their profits will go down even further.
Are you hopeful? The government is dependent on PPP, but are you hopeful that PPP will come in the present state of railway infrastructure?
Look, as you rightly pointed out, Mamta ji and others have also pointed out that we need PPP.
Right.
Look at the general budget, not just the rail budget. For the last 10 years, the previous government has been saying we want FDI, we want FDI, we want FDI, and yet not actually taking the steps which will welcome FDI,
right,
such as changing the caps on various sectors,
right,
like insurance. So, you can say it, but if you can walk the walk, if you can talk the talk, but if you don't walk the walk, it will not happen.
Right.
So, if they just say it and leave it at that, तो कुछ नहीं होगा.
So looks like the new government is also looking for new methods to bring in these changes, that how to actually attract FDI, knowing very well if you don't build the infrastructure, if you don't make your country investor friendly, don't create a single investment board, don't look into the land acquisition policies and rehabilitation policies, you can't really bring in more FDI, and as challenges of public-private partnership continue to linger on. But railways don't need incremental change, it needs generational change at this stage. We know the railways are suffering for a long time, completely out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Panda, Ms. Dev, and also Mr. Shekhawat for joining us in this program. And that's all we have for you in this edition of Agenda. We now take you straight to Lok Sabha for live proceedings. Stay tuned.